Now for tonight's program, what the fair tax would do for Illinois. Our speakers are Ann Corder, who serves as the League of Women Voters of Illinois Issue Specialist for Education and Fiscal Policy. She is on the steering committee of the Vote Yes for Fair Tax Ballot Committee. Her work as an attorney has focused on children's rights and state fiscal policy at the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, Voices for Illinois Children, Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago, and the Collaboration for Early Childhood. She was elected to 2 terms on the school board of Oak Park District 97. Ann holds a JD from Yale and an MA in Social Sciences from the University of Chicago. Jean Pierce serves as Issues and Advocacy Co-Chair, for the League of Women Voters of Illinois. The League has advocated for a fair tax for 50 years, and Jean has been an advocate for the past 6 years, where she has served with Ann as an educational funding specialist. Jean holds a PhD in educational psychology from Northwestern. She served as a professor of educational psychology for 34 years. Thank you both for being here tonight. Go ahead, Jean.
Okay. Just a second. All right, thank you very much for that introduction, Roberta. As she mentioned, the League has been supporting graduated rate income tax for the past 50 years, and we think it's needed now more than ever. So this is what my ballot looked like. I'm in Kane County, and I'm doing the, I already mailed it in, but right here at the top in the center column is the amendment that we're voting on. First it's in English and then in Spanish. I'll go over the words later on. I just wanted you to be aware that it's right at the top of the ballot. So here's what we're going to be talking about. What's wrong with our current tax system? What is the fair tax? What will it do for us? And how do we pass the fair tax? So the League is part of a nonpartisan ballot committee, which includes faith communities, unions, churches, well, I already said faith communities tonight, educational institutions, and so on. And we're making presentations like this throughout the state and talking with people. I do have to tell you that this particular picture was taken before the COVID crisis. So that's why everybody's on top of each other. So first we're going to talk about what's wrong with the current tax system. Basically, there are 2 main problems. It's fundamentally unfair and it's inadequate. It's unfair because it falls too heavily on the middle class and those struggling to get there. It's inadequate because it hasn't brought in enough money for us. It's caused budget deficits that pushed up our property taxes, and it's forced cuts to schools, public services, jobs, and so on. We'll be talking about each of those. So in 1970, our Constitution mandated that income taxes in Illinois must use a flat rate, for the same rate for everyone. And we'll talk about why that is unfair and inadequate. So the result is that a family making $25,000 and a family making $25 million are paying the same income tax rate. And since it's etched in stone in the Constitution, we can't modernize our tax system to respond to the economy. So here's why it's important to respond to the economy. Here's where the wealth growth has been. Over the past 40 years, the top 1% of our income earners have seen an increase of 254% of their income, as opposed to the bottom 99%, which have seen an increase of 20% of their income over the same time period. And if we looked at the bottom 90%, we'd see that their incomes actually decreased by 8% over the past 40 years. So the point is The only group which has seen an increase, a sizable increase in income, is indeed our top income earners. And yet, look at what's happening with our combined state and local taxes. When we look at property taxes, income, excise, sales, service, the whole 9 yards, our lowest 20% of income earners are paying over 14% of their salaries in these combined state and local taxes, whereas our top 1% are paying about half of that. They're only paying just over 7% of their income in these same combined taxes. This doesn't make sense because, as we saw, the top 1% is the only group which has seen a sizable increase in their income in the past 40 years. And this is inadequate. It's not bringing in enough money. Our state is currently paying only about 27% of the cost of public education, compared to other states which are paying about 47% on average. Now, the federal government picks up about 8% of the costs, but where does the rest of it come from? It's left up to local municipalities. So that means our property taxes are paying for 66%, of the cost of public education in our state, compared to in other states where local municipalities are raising money through property taxes, and they're only paying about 45% of the cost of public education. So we can see what's been happening to spending over the past 20 years. Beginning in fiscal year 2000, we can see what was appropriated for K-12 education, early childhood, higher ed, healthcare, human services, public safety, and the combined. Now, when we adjust these figures for inflation and population, we now see that over the past 20 years, let's look at higher education. That has actually decreased in spending, close to 50% less than it was in 2000. Healthcare has gone down over 18%. Human services gone down about 15%, public safety by about 20%. So the average for these has seen a decrease of these core human services of about 20% of funding over the past 20 years. Now, the exception to that rule has been in K-12 education and early childhood. Now, K-12, since the evidence-based funding formula was passed in 2017, they have seen increases in 2017, 18, and 19 to try to come up with more equitable and adequate funding for our education system, that our legislators promised that they would indeed increase funding each year. This did not happen this year because of the COVID crisis. So that's why you've seen a minimal change, but as we saw in the last slide, K-12 education is so far behind the ball in terms of state funding that this minimal increase is not, it's a drop in the bucket. And early childhood education has seen an increase, but once again, we're looking at a difference of, compared to these others, it's not in the same ballpark at all. So we're looking at millions of dollars here. And so, when you have, let's say, 8,000 here, 8,000 million, of course, is trillions. 8 trillion, as opposed to here we have 544 million, and down here the difference is 244. So the point is that it's just comparing apples to oranges when you look at the expenditures of early childhood. And yes, it has increased, but we still need far more. It's not nowhere near where it's needed to be. In addition to those cuts in core services, we also have seen severe cuts in environmental funding, and this translates into jobs. So from 2003, when we had over 1,200 Environmental Protection Agency jobs in the state, down to 2018, where we had about half of that. You can see the impact on regulation of air and water and ground quality, that they're not able to monitor the pollution because of these severe cuts in person power in the IEPA. So we can pause here and take questions about what has led to the current situation. Does anyone have any questions, concerns about how we got here?
So I don't know if it's so much as a question. So I joined tonight because I'm just trying to understand and gather as much information as I can. So like I said, I voted today. I actually turned my drop off of my ballot into a workout. I jogged over to 69 West Washington, and I was so proud. I took a picture. So I read up on all of it. And, you know, I read the amendments that we got in the mail with our voting packets, and I was torn. And, you know, I talked to my family and my friends, and I said, okay, so 32 states are doing this and have been doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes sense. And it says right up front that people that make 250,000 or more will be taxed more, which I absolutely think is fair. But then it said it also gives the government power to tax anyone. So the reason that I was torn, and you know, my mom and I are ultra liberals, you know, I would give the shirt off my back and give my apartment to anyone who needed it if I needed to. I don't have faith in Illinois to make the right decisions, but I went with my gut and I said, I have to trust that Illinois is going to make the right decisions and tax the right people. We're basically bankrupt, if not in total debt. So how can I trust that Illinois will make the right decisions?
Well, that's a good question, Nicole. There's several parts of the budget. One part is discretionary funding, and 96% of the general fund, the discretionary fund, goes to those core services that I already indicated: education, healthcare, mental health, public services, and public safety. And so that's written into the budget. We know that 96% of the discretionary funding is going to go to that. Of the other 4%, we know that the environment is going to be getting some of that. And so we can look to see where these promises have been made, and you know, where they're going to be allocating these funds. We've also seen that over the past 20 years, our legislators have been far more likely to make cuts in spending than to increase taxes. And you saw the serious cuts in spending, particularly hitting higher education and human services and so on. So our legislators do have a track record of being very unwilling to increase taxes on their voters. And when 97% of the people are going to see a tax break with this, you know, a legislator has to think long and hard before they're going to think about increasing taxes on those people. And especially now with the COVID crisis, you know, you have so many people out of work that it wouldn't make sense to think of taxing the middle and lower classes who have been so hard hit by the COVID crisis. And was there something else you wanted to say?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
would just.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Ann.
No, I just add that the governor presented a couple of scenarios when he presented his budget last February. He said, this is how we'll spend the money if we get the fair tax passed, and this is how we'll spend a lot less money if we don't pass it. And so he made it really clear where the money would go. And education was at the top of the list. Trying to get that evidence-based funding model fully funded so we could have some education equity in this state. Right now, we're still at the very bottom nationally in the difference between wealthy districts and poor districts. And we really need the money to address that. And now we've got COVID. So we know that we've got huge holes in our budget. And the trust that we have in our government is not just with legislators making good decisions or bad decisions. It's we trust them to get the money after the schools so the schools can open their doors. We trust them to send the money to fix bridges. We trust them to pay for mental health services and to pay for hospitals. And they do pay those bills, and they do merit our trust that they will be able to do those things. But if they don't have enough revenue, they won't be able to follow through on those obligations.
Right. Yeah. And I'm with you. I totally agree. I just feel like everything has changed since February, and everything continues to change, and new information is coming up every day. So I trust them. I really do. And that's why I voted yes for the fair tax on my ballot. But what happens if we have another spike and then we have to shut down again, and then money has to go elsewhere, and then what?
And
You know what I
basically-
mean? Like, it's so unpredictable, and it's so hard having an election at this time.
Mhm.
So I'm just putting my faith and trust in them, doing the right thing. Is
So-
that fair and
so-
reasonable?
What I'd like to do is go through the next part, which shows how this will work and what we anticipate the amount of money that we anticipate will be coming in. Because the point is that no matter what happens, we're going to need a sizable amount of money. And this is one way of doing it. So one thing that I do ask people to think about is how the tax system has impacted them and their family and friends, and coming up with a personal story that you can share when someone asks you, well, why should I vote for this? And say, well, we've seen some serious cuts in spending in these various areas. And because we weren't able to raise taxes on the only part of our economy, which has actually seen growth in the past 40 years. So here's my personal story about how our family has been affected. That I have a 6-year-old grandson who's hearing impaired, and he's going to be fully deaf by the time that he's an adult. So the kind of education that he gets right now is incredibly important, while he has some hearing left. And yet he lives in a school district that has only 60% adequate funding. So his district is one of them that would be targeted to get more funding through the evidence-based funding model when the state brings in more money. But unless the state can bring in more money, they can't continue to fund that model, and he's not going to get the education that he needs at this time in his life from the public school system. So, as I say, we're encouraging people to think about how have your family and friends been impacted by the budget cuts, which were necessitated by the fact that they couldn't raise taxes only on the part of our society which has seen a sizable income increase. So what is the fair tax? As you mentioned, the majority of states already use a fair tax system, including the majority of our neighboring states. Even the federal government uses a fair tax system. And in fact, we're one of only 4 states that actually mandates the flat tax in our state constitution. And this is the problem, that we have absolutely no way out as long as we're stuck with this antiquated system in our state constitution. So here's the wording that is on our ballot. And the part that's highlighted here is really the most important part. The amendment would remove the portion of the revenue article of the Illinois Constitution that's sometimes referred to as the flat tax that requires all taxes on income to be at the same rate. So there's a couple things to be aware of here. One is that it's not eliminating the flat tax. If in the future the legislature decided, well, gosh, we're seeing income growth across the board, you know, we could have the same rates for everybody, they could indeed return to a flat tax. This is not stopping that. This is expanding the opportunities and adding the option to go with a graduated rate. The other thing that's important to notice is that the rates are not in the Constitution. If they were, then there would need to be amendments to the Constitution more frequently than feasible. So the rates were passed in a separate bill last year, a bill that is contingent on passage of this amendment. So we're hoping people will vote yes. And what it means is that 97% of us will see no income tax increase. And in fact, the majority of us will be receiving a fairly minimal tax cut. Only people earning more than $250,000 a year will actually be paying more in income taxes. So here's the rates. Just like with the federal income tax, you're in different brackets, get taxed at different rates. So the first $10,000 that you earn is taxed at a rate of 4.75%. The first dollar that you earn over that $10,000 on up to $100,000 will be taxed at a rate of 4.90%. The first dollar above 100,000 on up to 250 would be taxed at our current rate of 4.95%. And that's the same whether you're a single filer or whether you're paying jointly. But after $250,000, your first dollar beyond that would be taxed at a much higher rate of 7.75%. And then when we go up here to the top level, then you see if you are making over $750,000 and you're a single filer, or if you're making over $1 million and you're joint filing, then your whole income would be taxed at 7.99%. So that would not be graduated for them. It would in essence be a flat tax for them. Over here, we see the percent of taxpayers who are affected. So it's 0.3% are making over 750,000 as single filers, over $1 million as joint filers. Altogether, the impact of these increased rates would be on only 3% of the population. There are a couple other things that are included in the bill. It expands the property tax credit from 5 to 6%, and it implements a child tax credit up to $100 per child for children 17 and under, for families making up to $100,000. So these are other things that would go into effect when the amendment is passed. Now you can see how you and your family would be affected if you go to bit.ly/FIT is fair income tax, FIT calculator, then you can find how you would benefit from the rate structure. And this is how we compare to neighboring states for basically looking at middle class and the lower income earners. So this is Illinois' current flat tax, 4.95%. here's what it will look like for the middle class if the new rate structure comes into effect because the amendment has passed in Illinois. This is Missouri. So basically for the middle class, they're paying a higher tax rate in Missouri than in Illinois. This is, now you can't really see Kentucky very well because it's 5% as opposed to 4.95% here. So it's pretty much basically right on top of ours. They're a flat tax state. This is Indiana. Indiana is another flat tax state. The thing to recognize about Indiana is that not only do they have a state income tax, they also have a county income tax in all except one county in Indiana. And so if you lived in Indianapolis, you would be paying taxes for the state and also for Marion County, and you would be paying a higher percentage than if you lived in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jean, so not to interrupt you, but my parents just moved. They sold our childhood home in Homewood, Illinois, and moved to Crown Point because of many reasons, you know, their health, and I think they thought taxes were going to be lower there, and I don't think they know this.
Well, I'm not sure what county Crown Point is in, but you can look up on the website about what is the county income tax for that area.
I think it's Lake County, Northwest Indiana.
Okay, Lake County
Wow.
might be the only county that does not have a county tax.
Okay.
There is one county in Indiana that does not have it, and it might be Lake County.
Okay. I'm sure my mom probably knows because she knows everything.
So here's the rate for middle class for Wisconsin, and here's the rate for Iowa.
Wow.
So the point is that it compares currently, and it will continue to compare favorably to our surrounding states. And yet it's going to be bringing in $3 billion for education, for public safety, for human services, for healthcare, and for the environment. As we said, those are the core services that are covered in the discretionary funds. And we know that over 96% of that funding is allocated for these. In addition, it's going to benefit small businesses, that it'll cut taxes for small businesses and farmers making less than $250,000 a year in profits. Now, you know, for them, you need to recognize that it's not just the income. They can subtract the business expenses and pay on their profits. And so the vast majority of small businesses and farmers will benefit from this as well. And then they'll be able to see investments in job training, entrepreneurial programs, higher ed for their workers, and so on. So were there any questions that were inspired by that part of the presentation?
I mean, just to emphasize that, I feel like most people who don't know all of these things are just thinking, you're going to tax me more, and they're not realizing the bigger picture that, no, this is helping your children, this is helping our environment, this is helping your life too. So that's what I'm trying to do, is spread the word, and exactly what you just said, Jean. They don't realize. Do you understand what goes into all of this? And if you don't vote for this, you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting your family, and you're hurting your kids. My only thing is what I mentioned was I'm worried about what might happen if things continue to get worse. And then, you know, my neighborhood businesses, my small businesses that I support are going to get taxed more. You know, it's so hard. There's so much that goes into it. And I just worry that my local businesses are going to suffer because
they probably are not.
$250,000.
Exactly. And they probably are not paying over 200 or having profits of over $250,000 for any one owner of the small business. I recognize that some small businesses are owned by different owners. And so it's a case of, is any one owner earning over $250,000 in profits? The chances are very good, especially for small businesses. And you know the percentage of small businesses that are impacted.
Yeah. There's 1.2 million small businesses in Illinois. And of those, far fewer than 100,000 earn over 250,000 in profits. So it's really a really small number. And those who maybe creep above 250 are going to only pay that extra rate on just that marginal income above 250. So if they make 260,000, they'll be paying a little bit more on 10,000, but it won't amount to very much. And in the meantime, they're going to be able to have better trained workers, a more thriving community, more money in the pockets of their customer base, and they will come out ahead, even if they have to pay a little more, but the vast majority will not be paying more, and they may see a tax cut. And those who've been hurt by COVID are definitely not going to be in that over $250,000 in profits line. They will be the ones who will be receiving the cuts and the ones who will be receiving extra assistance from the state government, if there's money to make that happen.
Right.
Nicole, you brought up another point, and one that we often hear, this concern, which frankly is spurred by fear mongering, that this is going to change the ability of the legislature to set rates. The legislature has always had the ability to set rates. This does nothing to change their ability to set rates. It changes the kind of, the fact that they can now impose taxes only on the wealthiest, but that's the only change. It does not give them any more ability to change, to set rates than they currently have. So there's a wealth of misinformation that is being shared through ads, and that's one of the big ones.
Yeah, Roberta?
That's right. Amen. And that's why this election couldn't have been at a worse time, or maybe a better time. And, you know, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to make myself more informed. And
we appreciate
they're trying to scare
Go
everybody.
forth and spread. No, but Jean, my question, or maybe it's more my comment, the legislature has already approved the tax structure dependent on the amendment passing.
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely. They did
So
that
this
last
is
year.
everybody's approved this.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
this is set in stone. We know what the tax rates will be for 2021, assuming this is passed.
And that's what the governor's tax calculator is based on.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
all the budgeting and all that stuff. I think
Yep.
we really need to make
Well,
that point
right.
clear.
And as Ann said, the governor came up with two budgets, one if it passes, one if it doesn't pass. And to be honest, if it doesn't pass, we are very likely to see an across the board increase in the flat tax from 4.95% to 5.95%. Because if they are going to try to bring in $3 billion, that would be one way of doing it. And boy, wouldn't that hurt people who are already being hit by COVID.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't know that. I didn't think about that. Now I have to consider, okay, what would happen if it doesn't pass? And I'm going to spread that word, because all people are thinking is, you're going to raise my taxes. No,
No,
that's not it. There's a lot more that goes into it. And if everybody would just inform themselves and make the right decision, then it would be so much easier. But it's so hard. How do I increase the emotional maturity of everyone around me?
well, we'll get to another suggestion in a minute. So here's what we need. We need either a yes vote of more than 50% of those voting in the election, or we need a yes vote of more than 60% of those voting on the question. So the example I like to use is if we only have 200 people voting in the election and 100 of them vote on the question and 61 of those vote yes, then we do not have 61 obviously is not more than 50% of 200, but it is more than 60% of those who voted on the question. So that's what it would take. We need people to vote yes on the question. And we recognize a lot of people will see a lot of words and skip over it. So that's why we need people to take their time and think about it. So yeah, you know, I think you're going to be a valuable aid for us, Nicole. Tell your friends and neighbors. Sign on as an endorser. An endorser is someone who's saying, yeah, you could use my name in an ad that, you know, tells people in Roselle-Bloomingdale that I support this. And when they see, oh gosh, this person we respect supports it, then we should too. Join us in educating target voters. Spread the word on social media. Write a letter to the editor. Request a yard sign. Now, I did distribute 1,000 yard signs. If there's a group that has a request for a number of yard signs, then we could put you in touch with them.
I have one if Nicole wants it.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
So I don't have a yard. I live in
there
an
you go.
apartment in River North.
Give it to your mom. So,
I'll give it to my mom.
She's
Yes.
in Indiana.
It's in the wrong state, but that's okay.
Oh, she's on our side for sure. So
Okay,
don't worry
so
about that.
so
I don't have a yard. I don't have a husband. What am I
Oh.
gonna do?
hey, you have plenty of time. So,
I have lots of friends, and I've been fighting with my Republican friends, and you know, we don't have to go into that, but yes, I am spreading the word, just the facts, right? That's all we need.
Yeah, and you know, with a lot of people, they don't want to get into a long, complicated discussion. So we're also encouraging people to develop elevator speeches, which would be about 30 seconds, which means about 60 to 70 words. Free of jargon, you talk about the need, the consequences, and the call to action. So this is mine. Our best hope of funding programs that address problems highlighted during the COVID crisis is a fair tax. It would raise taxes on the only segment of society which has seen an increase in income in recent decades, people earning over $250,000. That's why I'm voting for the fair tax, and I hope you do too.
I love it.
So let me stop sharing and let's talk about some of the other questions that frequently have been raised. One of them is, all of our wealthy people are going to flee from the state the minute that this is passed. And to be honest, that hasn't happened in other states. That New Jersey had a similar increase. And no, they did not lose all their wealthy people. In fact, the states that they're likely to go to, New York and California, have higher tax rates for the upper levels than are being proposed. And typically the reasons that the wealthiest move are because of the climate, because of family, because of other concerns, not because of the tax rate. They're not impacted nearly to the degree that the lowest income earners, who are spending every penny that they make. I mean, so when you have an income tax means a lot to a lower income earner who isn't saving a lot. But, so it's using a high percentage of what they're making. And what's another typical question we hear?
Retirement income.
Oh, yes, retirement income. Yes, this is another. And there's an ad out featuring this lovely little old lady who is scared, hopelessly, that she's going to lose all of her retirement income. The point is, retirement income is not taxed in Illinois. And there is absolutely no reason to think that the passage of this amendment would change that. In fact, the AARP has said that if the state brings in more money through a graduated rate income tax, there is less likely that retirement income would be taxed, because they wouldn't need to. The state's bringing in more money. And so it's what you're seeing in the ads, it's the battle of the billionaires. And there's a whole lot of fear mongering. And this sweet little old misguided lady is part of it.
But there's a press conference tomorrow with some groups that represent seniors that is coming out fighting against that.
And they're going to be asking the billionaires who are funding those ads to withdraw them, because they're wrong, they're misleading, they're fear-mongering.
Yeah.
Welcome to election time.
Boy.
Right.
I mean, the one thing that might get taxed is people in the upper income groups that, for example, I have a friend whose wife was a teacher for many, many years. So she's getting an IMRF pension. He was a village administrator for many years. So he's getting an IMRF, and they pay like nothing in taxes. So, I mean, would this might impact those kind of, he's basically said, charge me taxes. This is ridiculous.
No,
And
there's nothing in this amendment that would lead to taxing retirement income. That what the opposition is saying, this might happen because this is a foot in the door. And as soon as you raise taxes on the wealthiest, then guess who's next? It's the retirees. Well, that's the thinking or non-thinking behind this, that it's all fear-mongering. They're saying what might happen, not what would happen. We're telling you what would happen. And we're also telling you that AARP is convinced that it's going to be less likely that retirement income will be taxed once the state is bringing in more money from the wealthiest.
There may down the road someday be an effort to tax retirement income, because we're of the states that have an income tax, we're one of only 3 states that does not tax any retirement income, not Social Security or 401ks or IRAs, and none of that gets taxed here. But if the fair tax doesn't pass, they could go ahead and choose to tax retirement income. They could change that exemption and just go ahead and apply the rates to retirement income if they want to. There's nothing to stop that from happening today.
So it's more likely that would happen today than in the near future. There's absolutely nothing that ties the taxation of retirement income to this amendment.
Yeah, and yeah, it's very nice that your neighbor wants to be taxed more. That's great.
Well, he was
I
not.
think that's good.
We were at a legislative breakfast, and they pretty much wanted to stone him, but he was making a point that there are people out there who have benefited, yet, nobody's asking them for tax money, and they would be in a position to give it, and it really would be no skin off their nose. It's these poor people that, 4.95% of $50,000 is a whole lot of money, whole lot of buying power when you're down there.
The other thing to keep in mind, I have a state pension because I was a professor, and I don't have Social Security. And when I turned 65, I started applying for Medicare, naively not realizing that Medicare is tied to Social Security. if I hadn't been married, I would not have Medicare. Okay, I get a state pension. I do not get Social Security with it. And with that comes Medicare. And I mean, that's huge.
That doesn't seem fair. So I'm not married, and I mean, don't even get me started on, all that, but I feel like you can't really go there, like if you're married or single or, and we're moving to that place of diversity and inclusion where you cannot put somebody in a bracket because of enter this here. Are you married? Are you single? Are you black? Are you white? Are you, it's the same thing. So,
Well, as I say, the real issue came down to the fact that I've been an educator all my life, and in many cases, educators have not gotten Social Security. So the only way that I qualified for Medicare was because my husband did have Social Security.
wow. So we should look into that too.
There's no retiree health benefits?
There were, I paid for a health insurance, right? But no, nothing like Medicare. I mean, and in fact now, no, I have Medicare and I pay for a Medicare supplement, but that's it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, let's see, what else? I think we've hit most of the concerns. Maybe just farms are a little bit spooked.
Yeah. So I was telling Ann that yesterday I was downstate. My husband's family has a farm, about 600 acres or so in central Illinois. And I started seeing all these vote no signs, and I knew that they were against it. And so I thought, well, if I can have a reasoned discussion with anyone, I can certainly have it with my sisters-in-law. So I said, please tell me, why is the Farm Bureau telling people to vote no? Because that's where it's coming from. And she got this terrified look on her face and said, because we have been told that small farmers will lose their farms. No questions about it, if this passes. And I said, well, that sure isn't my understanding. Where is that coming from? On what are they basing that? Because once again, small farmers are just like small business, that it's on the profits over $250,000. Now, my family may be making over $250,000, but believe me, their profits sure aren't there at all, because they've got all these expenses for expensive machinery, for this, that, and the other thing, property tax. But at any rate, they're they are not making over $250,000 in profits. And so she said, well, we'll go look at the Farm Bureau's website. So I looked at the Farm Bureau's website and I saw in huge letters, vote no, and absolutely no explanation as to why. So I don't know if the Farm Bureau has been hijacked by the billionaires who are opposing this or what. I honestly can't tell you, but I really, really hoped that I would get an explanation for why they oppose it, and I haven't been able to.
I think they're uninformed and not paying attention, Jean, and they're just seeing, with blinders.
Well, I mean, usually the Farm Bureau is very well informed, and you really can trust them. Why they are so far off base and misleading so many poor. So I mean, my sister-in-law, if you'd seen her face, she was terrified. This is the worst fear of a small farmer, is that you take my farm away, and they're convinced that will happen when this passes.
Well, I think historically, they're thinking, okay, this is what I've experienced in my entire life. But right now is nothing like anyone has ever experienced. So I feel like, how do you quantify somebody's judging of this? Like I said before, you know, I don't know. I'm just trying to get as much information as I can, because with COVID and everything being turned upside down, I understand everyone questioning it, but I'm going to go ahead and judge you if you aren't gathering all the facts and doing what you need to do in this landscape, because it's not normal. It's not a normal year, and you can't quantify it. So we're like building a new foundation of how we're quantifying things. And I think the foundation of that is get as much information as you can from as many people as you can, and not from ads on TV. That's why I'm here, you know, like, I don't want to listen to all this BS.
How did you find us, Nicole? How did you find us?
Facebook. I found you on Facebook. Thank God. I'm so glad, and I hope we stay in touch forever and ever.
Please stay in touch.
You know what I mean? Like, my heart goes out to farmers and small businesses and everyone.
Sure.
But it is now more important than ever to gather as many facts as you can and not be opinionated. And believe me, I have had my opinions, but I'm just trying to build and spread the word that this isn't normal, and this is a very important election, and it's a very important vote for the fair tax. So do everything you can,
Well,
and
we
let's
sure-
all be together.
We appreciate it, and just having, you know, the sound bites, the you know, elevator speech or the personal story or whatever, that goes a long way with a lot of people. I'm wondering, we have 3 other people who have been joining, and I'm wondering if any of them have any questions that we haven't addressed.
Well, Michelle, Brian, and Sue are Roselle-Bloomingdale League of Women Voters members. And they answered my text when I said, "Where are you people?" So anybody got a question?
This is a psychologically safe environment.
It's true. No, my next email is going to be to the University of Illinois Cooperative or whoever, to see what their thoughts are on this, because I mean, I've spent good enough time in Central Illinois, and yeah, that really bothers me that there's nothing behind it. I get it if they have anything behind it, but just to say vote no. And it's why the heck the signs for the vote no. We have sign regulations in our neck of the woods, and these things are huge. And you're supposed to only fill up, I forget what it is. It's a total square footage. So if it's on a normal sign, you can do both sides, but they're doing double the size in the front and on the back. And I don't know why. I know it's ridiculous.
Another misconception of people downstate is that they frequently think that they are not getting their fair share of what they paid to the state in income taxes. But actually, we can share figures that show that downstate, and particularly farthest south, but central and southern Illinois, is getting more than Chicago and the suburbs are in terms of return on investment from their income taxes. So
did they fill out the census? I mean, fill out the census, people. How hard is it?
There you go.
Actually, 99.7% of Illinois has been accounted for, which we've done
Really?
well. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Where did
I'm
those numbers
surprised.
come from?
The Census Bureau. I made the mistake of subscribing to pretty much every one of their newsletters. So I get like 12 census things a day, but I sift through them, and I was floored, because I really thought it would be.
Know. Good.
But that's Illinois. Illinois is not as screwed up as people are trying to make it sound. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
there are
River North.
places-
Right.
There are
is
places
it-
that are messed up, but there are certain,
Would you like
Yeah.
me to stop the recording?
Yeah, stop the recording so we can really get real now.